Hi, I'm Scott Leadingham. Thanks for joining us here in the unique Northwest. Today we are joined by Inland Northwest correspondent Nick Deshay. Thanks for joining us today, Nick.
Thanks, Scott.
We are fresh off the heels of the Washington and Idaho presidential primary. We're not going to talk about specifics and numbers and things like that. That's being sorted out still. But we do want to talk about a little bit about these larger themes, about what voters have thought about and told you about in the region. So let's talk a little bit about that. What are just some of the things that you noticed as we led up to the primary in Washington and Idaho recently?
Well, I think about it, how big a difference we saw from 4 years ago when I was covering it then. 4 years ago, Bernie Sanders came to town twice. Bill Clinton came to town to stump for his wife Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump went to Coeur d'Alene, or roundabouts Coeur d'Alene. This year, nobody came.
And by town, you mean Spokane, right?
I mean the Spokane, I mean
Area.
Eastern Washington, Inland Northwest. Nobody really showed up. I don't know if that was just the schedule of the Tuesdays of the primary voting, or maybe it had something to do with Washington State switched from having a precinct caucus system for the Democrats. Oh, this time it's a state-run presidential primary. Bernie Sanders usually does well in the caucuses. We saw that, Iowa and other states that had some caucuses. But this year we didn't have it. He didn't show up, and he's dead even right now with Joe Biden in the state. So maybe that's why he didn't come, knowing he wouldn't perform as well. I mean, in 2016, I think he got like 75% of the vote in the state, in the caucus system. He's nowhere near that this time.
Some of the themes that jump out to you that voters have talked about, just some of the issues that are of importance that you are following leading up to the election season and you will be looking at going forward over the next year.
Yeah, well, I think what we are hearing locally is not too different than what we hear nationally. You kind of have a schism. But on the Democratic side, you have kind of the establishment moderate wing that's lined up behind Joe Biden right now, and then you have the progressive, more liberal wing that's lined up behind Bernie Sanders. It's the same thing. I have people I've talked to in the Inland Northwest. On Bernie's side, they want universal health care and free college tuition and all the stuff you hear about nationally. And on the Biden side, the people who are a little bit more moderate, they want to just defeat President Trump, and they think that's the most important thing, and they think he's the most electable. So it's really not that different from what I've gathered than the national conversation.
Speaking of issues that are always on people's minds, particularly in election years, gun issues. Obviously, that's not going to be any different this year, and maybe perhaps even more so. You recently covered a very interesting issue that's going on in North Idaho in Sandpoint, and particularly the music festival called the Festival at Sandpoint. Tell us what that is about.
So basically it comes down to this. The Festival at Sandpoint is a pretty popular festival. It's been going on since 1983. And just this last year, they instituted a no guns, no weapons policy. Now it is North Idaho, it is Idaho. Guns and the Second Amendment are a pretty big deal there. And so the gun rights advocates kind of lined up and said this isn't right. They went and challenged the festival to its face, and they were going to sue. But before they got to sue, the Bonner County Sheriff, and Bonner County is where Sandpoint is located, he and the county commissioners sued first the city, which owns the piece of land that the festival is on. Now the festival hasn't joined the lawsuit at all. It's a private entity. So right now we have the city of Sandpoint versus Bonner County and the sheriff. Bonner County and the sheriff say the Constitution doesn't allow you to ban guns on public property. The city says we're leasing the land to a private entity, so for the span of time the festival runs, it's not public property, it's private property. So what you have is kind of a constitutional rights issue versus private property. And so that's kind of where the two sides are butting heads.
Yeah, that is extremely interesting because it's a public land but being leased to a private entity, and for intent they're saying, well, it becomes almost like private property under the terms of the lease. So in a lot of states, especially places like Idaho, where we see a lot of people who care deeply about private property rights, now that's sort of butting up with the idea of Second Amendment rights. And so this is real interesting interplay happening, and that might come up in a court challenge that is happening right now.
Yeah.
Do you expect that, or is this issue very ripe for further up the legal ladder, federal court challenges? I want to say U.S. Supreme Court, but maybe possibly.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. It's early days right now. It seems like it right now. I mean, we have right now the question before a Kootenai County judge, even though it's in Bonner County, of who will win. Is it property? I mean, does the Constitution win out over the property? Who has a sounder argument? We'll see. I can imagine, having talked to both sides or all sides, nobody really wants to, I guess, fold their hand. They all want to take it. The festival is very popular. They want to keep it going. Sandpoint wants it there because it's called the Festival at Sandpoint. Where the county commissioners and the sheriff, they're really adamant that this is a gun rights thing and this is kind of a freedom issue to them. And so I don't see either side backing down. So whoever wins, whoever loses, there probably will be appeals going up for as far as they can take it. Not to mention, in Idaho right now at the state legislature, we're in the middle of the legislative session, there's a raft of gun rights bills and a constitutional carry, as they call it, happening right now. And so the state politicians are really into gun rights as well. So a lot of people have a lot at stake in this, and there's a lot of conversation still happening.
We look forward to more of your reporting on that topic. I'm sure it's not going to go away anytime soon. So other things that you covered a lot of regional growth in previous positions and previous reporting, not just in Spokane, but a lot in Spokane, but also some of the things that you will be focusing on here in the inland Northwest, smaller towns and cities, Pullman, Moscow, how urban affairs, plays out there at the city council level. Talk a little bit about what's going on in Pullman and Moscow in terms of how they envision their downtowns and how that might change.
Yeah, well, Pullman right now, the city council is discussing a downtown master plan. Now that's just a plan, so it doesn't, if they pass it, which it looks like they're going to pass it, they still have to fund it and do everything in the plan. So they could pass the plan and nothing will happen. But the plan itself has some interesting tidbits. Main Street, everybody who has been to Pullman knows Main Street. It's the 3-lane one-way that runs through the historic downtown. The plan says take it down to 2 lanes, put in a wide bike lane, get rid of the parallel parking and make it angled parking. So that would really change the feel of downtown, just that one aspect of the plan. It also has other things in it of, increasing the trail system, making the plazas a little bit nicer, kind of shining up the downtown and making it, as they say, people-centric. And that'd be a big change for Pullman. Everybody knows downtown Pullman is pretty car-centric. You compare that to Moscow, which doesn't really have a highway running through the center of its historic downtown. It has a little tiny 2-way street, going both ways. Very lively, feels very different. It's much smaller than downtown Pullman, but it feels very different. So to me, it's very interesting to see these 2 towns that have a lot in common. They got universities, they're really close to each other, kind of twins in a way, or siblings. They have very different downtowns. So I think Pullman is on the cusp of getting closer to the Moscow model or pulling back to a more historic Pullman downtown that was around before everybody started driving everywhere.
Yeah, that's one thing that's always struck me, and I think a lot of people who've ever been in the Moscow-Pullman region, and whether you be students or if you've lived here a long time, or even if you're just visiting, that these towns that are very close together, like you said, are very different, just vibe-wise, how you get around, how they're laid out and planned. Pullman a lot more hills, I think, right, kind of coming around downtown and leading up to the university, Washington State. University of Idaho, a little different. But that being said, I just wonder if, are these the two city councils and city planners, are they in any way learning from each other and kind of swapping, best practices, or is it pretty much like, no, like separate towns, you guys do it completely separately because you're so different over there just 8 miles across the border?
Well, I've got a lot of reporting to do, but from what I can tell so far, there's not a lot of communication other than the informal kind of social media and talking at events. But at Pullman specifically, they care less about what Moscow does and thinks and more of how the university thinks about it, how the Chamber of Commerce thinks about it, how the Downtown Pullman Association thinks about it. And of course, the city council or the city itself. Those are the 4 entities that are involved in this plan. So getting those 4 to agree, I think, is the first order of business, and that's no easy order. Beyond that, they'll look beyond their borders. I met with Councilman Brandon Chapman, and he's really into the best practices. He
Pullman council member.
Yeah, Pullman city council member, yes, thank you. He says we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let's look elsewhere and see what other towns have done and bring it back to Pullman. If it worked there, it could work here. And so he's the one that's looking beyond the borders. And not to bring it back to Sandpoint, but Sandpoint had a couple wide one-ways running through their downtown. A couple years ago, they brought it back to 2-ways. Everybody there seems to think it's a good idea. Deer Park, which is north of the big city of Spokane, pretty rural. They put in some modern transportation infrastructure with a few roundabouts on a major highway. And so these little towns around the inland Northwest are starting to revision how their streets are run and bringing it, I would say, more into the 21st century idea of city planning.
Is that to eventually get, like you said, kind of be more pedestrian or people-centric rather than like, these is just a place where businesses are and you drive to park in front of the business and you do your commerce and leave? Is it to make people want to stay down there and sort of recreate and be down? Is that what all these towns are kind of thinking of?
I think that's part of the idea is, business friendly, and there are studies that show if people are walking by a business, they're more likely to pop in than if they're driving by. But it's also about safety. If somebody's going 30 miles per hour and they hit a pedestrian, the odds of severe injury are pretty great. If you're going 20 miles per hour it flips on its head. Like, the odds are pretty great you'll be okay. And so just slowing cars down by 5-10 miles per hour really increases pedestrian safety. And so that makes it safer, and that also increases more people to come downtown, increases more dollars for local business. That's the idea. Of course, the other side is, hey, we're not only just shopping here, this is our route home or to school or to church or to shopping. Don't bring it down to one lane where it's just a traffic jam the whole time. So they're trying to find that balance right now.
Well, it's interesting reporting. We thank you for sharing with us, and we look forward to hearing more from you on these and other topics.
Thank you, Scott.
You can see more of Nick's reporting on these and other topics at our website, nwpb.org. Thank you for joining us here in the unique Northwest.